extreme honor to be here tonight to talk to you about something that's so near and dear to my heart. It's a conversation that I wish we wouldn't have to have, but it's a very important conversation nonetheless. As an elected official, especially in the state legislature, when I was elected for the first time in 2012 to the state assembly, I knew I was going to the state assembly to draft legislation. I was going to make a change for Milwaukee. But when I got there, I quickly realized that there's another side of this job that the public doesn't see. It's not something that I'm required to do, but it's something that I want to do because I never want to forget. The first time I ever went to a child's funeral because of gun violence was for Sierra Guyton. The night that I heard she died, I just felt so bad. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. I felt if I cried, it might make me feel better. But the tears just wouldn't begin to flow. But then a week later, when one of my friend's sons was shot, I did cry. Because I watched him grow up from a child. I saw how devastated his family was. And I saw how bad he had tried to change his life. But how in the end, it didn't make a difference. Because he had fell victim to gun violence. When I went to Sierra's funeral, I walked in, I viewed the body, and till this day, I can still see her laying in her casket. Sierra was a 10-year-old little girl who was playing on the playground with about 50 kids when gunfire erupted. 16 rounds were fired on that playground for the potential of 16 victims. But this 10-year-old little girl lost her life. At the funeral, when it was about to end, and they were closing the casket, the cries that I heard from her family was something that I would never forget. But the drive in my car going into the Capitol at Madison was probably the toughest ride that I had ever taken. And then when I walked into that Capitol and I listened to the small talk and the people laughing and the people being happy and the people arguing over stupid stuff, none of that made sense because I had just left a funeral for a 10-year-old little girl who died from a gunshot wound to the head. I wish I could say that that was the only funeral that I had been to for a child victim, but it wasn't. Because after Sierra, there was Layla Peterson, the 5-year-old that was shot in her grandfather's lap while he was reading her a book. After Layla was little Bill Tao. He was 13 months old. 40 rounds were fired into that home. For Bill's 14-month birthday, I sat at his funeral. And I remember trying to compose myself and trying to think about what I was going to say to his mother. What do you say to a mother who's sitting on the front row bench at her 14-month-old's funeral? When I was talking to her, the pictures on her phone were flashing across the screen. And there was a picture of baby Bill Tao, and you could clearly tell that it must have been his hospital picture because he had tubes, but the tubes weren't connected to anything. And then I realized that this mother has on her phone the last picture of her baby. And it's when he's dead in a hospital bed from a gunshot wound. After Little Bill Tao, it was Rashid Child. It was Archie Brown. And the victims go on. And if you talk about 2016, you're talking about Zalea Jenkins, the 9-year-old who died from a gunshot wound to the head. This isn't about gun violence or about taking away somebody's Second Amendment rights. This is about making sure that every child in this city, regardless of where they live, regardless of what their socioeconomic background is, that they have a right to live. And what we fail to realize, and what I even failed to realize, that the majority of these children are victims before the bullets even hit their tiny bodies. They're victims because of where they live. If Sierra Guyton lived in any other zip code, she'd still be here. And that's not acceptable. And so, when we talk about gun legislation, there's a lot to be done here in the state of Wisconsin because we have a lot of gun laws that don't make sense. For example, if your gun is lost or stolen, it's not required that you report it. So if your gun is lost or stolen in the state of Wisconsin, you do not have to report it. So when you talk about straw purchases, if someone is caught in this state for making a straw purchase, it's only a misdemeanor. But if they say their gun was lost or stolen, there's no charges filed at all. And that's the issue. It doesn't matter how many times you're caught in this state with an illegal concealed carry, as long as you are not committing a crime with that gun, it's a misdemeanor, regardless of how many times. So you know what that means? That means that that individual who's illegally carrying a gun, because he's being charged with a misdemeanor, can still qualify for a concealed carry. So can the straw purchaser, and that's the issue. Concealed carry looks totally different in Milwaukee than it does in Waukesha, than it does in Wausau, or any other part of this state. And the reason is, last year in the city of Milwaukee alone, we had over 15,000 felony arrests. We only have 120 district attorneys. If you count the 4 part-time, okay, we'll boost it up to 120. But there's no way that 120 district attorneys can prosecute 15,000 felonies. So a lot of those cases are pleaded out, except for the most egregious. And the only thing that prevents you from having a concealed carry in this state is a felony or a misdemeanor domestic violence. So what does that mean? That means that individuals who have committed violent misdemeanors that started out as violent felonies are still able to conceal carry. And in this state, it is illegal for anyone to keep or maintain information on a concealed carry holder, including the police. And in the city of Milwaukee, when concealed carry was passed, gun crimes went up. Now, we're not saying that that's the cause. What we are saying is that we don't know, and we can't research that. I understand the need for people to have guns, and in some communities, I understand that more than others. But we also need to understand the need to protect the life that's on the streets of Milwaukee, and particularly our kids. I passed a piece of legislation last session that imposed a mandatory minimum sentence for violent felons who were caught carrying illegal handguns.
Thank you.
And that was the hardest piece of legislation that I ever had to pass. Not because it wasn't needed, because it was. Because I took flack from my side. I took flack of just a little bit from the other side. But the fact is that the majority of those kids that I talked about, whose funerals that I went to, they did not live in my district. But they did live in Milwaukee. And when you walk through the doors of those funerals and those families see those gold pins that we wear as legislators, it gives them a sense of comfort. Comfort, not that we're bearing gifts or that we're doing anything, but to them it says, you cared enough about my kid that you gave up part of your day to come and see about us. Who we elect into office is so important because our families and our children are important. And if people don't understand the need for us to protect their lives at all costs, and if people don't understand that innocent children are dying in this city, there's no reason that a 2-month-old should ever be shot. If people can't understand that, then they don't deserve to be in the state legislature. So thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you for the time for me to share these stories. And just realize that you being here and you being concerned about this issue is more important than you know. Because it gives me the ammunition and the support that I need to go back to the Capitol and try and make real change. So thank you.